If you're going to be playing Elden Ring with the release of the new Tarnished Edition DLC, whether you are a brand new player and you've never played Elden Ring in your life, or you're a returning player and haven't done a playthrough in a long time but decided to do another one with this DLC, this video is going to be for you. You're going to learn a lot of new things as a brand new player that will help you understand how to play this game, and for returning players, this is going to refresh your memory on some things that will make your journey in the Lands Between much easier. I made this to be the ultimate guide to understanding and learning Elden Ring. So with that being said, there's going to be a lot of information in this video, but don't feel like you have to necessarily absorb all of it at once. Feel free to come back to this whenever you need it. I highly encourage you to come back, as there will be timestamps for certain things you might be looking for. We're going to begin very simple and get into more advanced stuff later on, but this video will arm you with all of the information and knowledge you need to do a successful playthrough of Elden Ring if you're a brand new player or if you're returning. So let's get started. Your journey in Elden Ring is going to start at the character selection screen, where you can pick a handful of classes to start with. Now, with the release of Tarnished Edition, there will be two brand new ones, the Heavy Knight and the Idis Knight. These are the ones that were specifically added in this DLC. So if you want a new experience, I would recommend starting with one of these classes, but I will add the caveat that what you choose here is important to an extent, but you can absolutely completely change your build later on in the game, meaning all the character selection is determining is whether you're going to be spawning in with certain items, certain weapons, and the general build around your character right now. So let's say you go with Vagabond, you're going to be more of a strength build unless you change it later on, and you could also go with a Sorcerer that's going to be more magic based. But honestly, my advice is don't worry about it too much, just pick a class because you can put stats into any one of these levels as you play the game. Now that's great, but what do these stats actually mean? There's quite a lot to these, but we're going to keep it very simple for now. The first one is just your master level. Every single time you go to level up, that number will increase. But your first stat is Vigor. Right here, this is just going to be representative of your max health bar. Every time you increase this stat, your HP increases. Your Mind is similarly to your HP, your FP, or your magic stat. This is how much you have the capacity to cast spells or incantations or use any kind of magic. Endurance is a stat that roughly increases how much capacity your body can carry. So heavy armor, weapons will all account for how much weight is on your body, and you can carry more the higher your endurance is. Both strength and dexterity are attributes that essentially deal how much physical damage you're going to be putting out. So the higher strength and higher dexterity, the more general physical damage you're going to do, and it's going to do better on certain weapon types depending on whether it's a strength-based weapon or a dexterity-based weapon. Either way, just think of these as physical. Intelligence and faith are similarly magic-based. There are certain spells or sorceries that are obviously very in tune with intelligence, and then other incantations that will scale off of faith, which we'll talk more about later. And arcane is one that essentially is how quickly you can deal status effects. If you've played Elden Ring before, then you probably understand it's a bit more granular than that, but if you're a brand new player, all you really need to know is that strength and dexterity are physical, more or less, and intelligence and faith are magic-based, and arcane is its own thing with like status effects. So either way, once you've selected your character, you can also choose a keepsake. Now, this is actually the only thing really in this menu that will have an effect on gameplay. Your appearance, your body type, none of that will actually have an effect on how strong or weak your character is. And if you're a brand new player, I would honestly recommend either taking in a golden seed or a stone sword key. And then once you have all that, you can confirm your selection and begin the game. As soon as the cutscene is over, you should spawn in this area right here, and when you go forward and open the door, you will be set in the Chapel of Anticipation. This is the starting section, and I would recommend here getting used to your controls a little bit. Now, I'm going to explain to you the fundamentals of controls and how to get around, but real quick, I want to familiarize you with the inventory selection. So once you hit your pause button or you bring up this screen right here, you can go to your inventory, and each of these slots represents what is either in your hand or on your body. So the first slot is going to be what's in your right hand. This should ideally be your primary weapon. Your left hand, maybe you'll have a shield or some kind of seal for an incantation. You don't have to have anything in your left hand. You can always take things out if you want a lighter equipment load. And then just below that is going to be your talismans. Don't worry about these just yet because you don't have any at the moment, but the amount you can apply will increase as you play more of the game. These will be explained later on. For now, just get comfortable with the controls of moving around and also attacking. You can use your right trigger to do a light attack. You can also use the other right trigger to do a heavy attack, and you can chain these together. Heavy attacks are going to do a little bit more damage, but are going to take longer to come out, so just keep that in mind. And then you can also use some defensive options here. You can hold your left trigger to guard, but I honestly don't really recommend this as a strategy, especially in the beginning unless you have a shield. But what I really recommend for your primary defensive option is to roll. The button to roll will be slightly different depending on what you're playing on, but for me, it's my circle button on PlayStation, so I'll click this and you can roll in any direction. This should be your primary form of dodging, as you have invincibility frames for the duration that you are rolling. The thing you need to understand about this is your equipment load that you can check in your inventory slot. Now, if your equipment load says medium or light, this is good. This is ideally where you want to be, as you can roll and get the maximum amount of iframes. However, if you're carrying too heavy armor or a weapon, you might get a heavy load, which will slow down your roll and give you less iframes. This is not ideal, so I would try your best to stick around in the light to medium range roll. Once you've played around a little bit with that here, go across the bridge and then head into this section where you're going to encounter your first fight. Now, depending on how this goes, it's going to end the same way either way, whether you win or fail, so don't worry if you die. That is part of the game. Regardless of this fight's outcome, you will then get a cutscene, and once you're out of that cutscene, you will be in the caves. Now, right here, you can either go to the right side and go into the Cave of Knowledge, which is essentially a tutorial for the basics of the game, similar to what I've gone over already. So if you feel like you need more explanation on the basic controls and fundamental mechanics, then I would definitely do this as a new player. If you are returning to the game, you may not need to do this, but either way, you can either skip that or you can head to the left over here, go straight out the door, and then find your first site of grace. These are going to be your checkpoints and safe places throughout the game. So every time you find a site of grace, go up to it and click the button to touch it, and then it will become available for you to rest at. Get in the habit of finding as many of these as you can, but once you've gotten your first one, you can head through, and then you're also going to see a little statue right here. Now, if you spawned into the game with a stone sword key, you have one of them, but if you bring back another later in the game, you can actually open this door. You won't be able to do this if you're a new player, but I'm going to show you what it will look like when you do find another stone sword key in your journey. You can open this door and then go into that dungeon, but don't worry about that for now, especially if you're brand new. Rather, just head forward into the elevator and it will take you all the way up to the surface, and then you'll be greeted by a door in which you open it. Then you will have access to Limgrave. It's one of the best moments in the entire game, and literally everything in the game now opens up to you, and I do mean everything. So there's going to be a lot up front, but I'm going to show you kind of a general path of how to get started. This section can be really overwhelming, especially because there is so much that you could possibly be doing, and my goal is to teach you how to play Limgrave, because once you learn how to play Limgrave, you learn how to play the rest of the game. So my job is to arm you with the knowledge of how to approach this. So as soon as you spawn into Limgrave, what I would recommend doing is going up to talk to the NPC that is right outside the door. You can speak to him, exhaust his dialogue, and I would get in the habit of doing that for most NPCs. Once you've done that, touch the site of grace right here. This is, again, another main spawn point that you can take. Now, from here, you can also go around and pick up either items off of bushes, or if you see this glowing orb, these are always items that you can pick up throughout the game, and I would recommend picking things up when you see them, of course. Now, from here, I recommend your first steps to be heading towards the church that is just off the cliff in front of you. What will probably happen is on your way, you're going to pick a fight with the tree sentinel, and he will probably whoop your ass. If that happens, if you die to this enemy, that's okay, because this is another learning moment where it's important to figure out how this works. You can see in the bottom right, this is your rune counter. This is essentially the currency that you use for everything, buying stuff and also leveling up. So you want more runes. Now, if you had runes and you die, the next time you respawn, the runes are going to be located where you died, and you have one life to go and pick them up. So if in that life you pick them up successfully, they will go back to your inventory and you'll keep them. But if you die before you reach your runes, they will be gone forever. So make sure that you protect these. Either way, if you die to that tree sentinel, respawn and just go pick your runes back up and head towards the church once again. You can ignore this guy for now because he's very powerful. If you made it here to the church successfully, you can see that there's a grace here. You can also pick that up. And while you're here, you'll notice that there is a merchant over on the side and also a smithing table with a item on it. So smithing tables will be for upgrading regular weapons. This will be very useful in the early game, especially right now when you're just starting out. And then also the merchant on your right side, you can either purchase items from him or you can sell him things, including all of the little berries and flowers that you pick up along your way. If you're just a little bit short on runes, you can always sell him things just to kind of get some extra change. Now, if you go to pull up your map, as you can see, it should look something like this. It will be grayed out and you can't really see a ton, but what you can see are the sites of grace you've already collected, and you can see a faint orange glow in the distance right here. This is where the location of a map fragment is, and when you pick this up, it will illustrate and color in your map in detail. So what you want to do right from this point is go and find that map fragment, and there's also a site of grace next to it that is very important to pick up as well. Follow this route where you make your way from the church and go over the hill towards this gate, and you'll see that there is a camp of enemies, a site of grace, and something that looks vaguely important. So when you reach this grace, this one is special as Melina will come in to talk to you and give you two things. She will give you access to the Spectral Steed Torrent and also the ability to level up. The ability to level up is pretty self-explanatory. Every time you go to a grace and you click on this icon, you can see how many runes you need to increase a level, and you can pick any of the stats or attributes on here to increase the number of it. So let's say you have enough runes to upgrade or level up once, and you put that into the vigor stat, that will give you more HP. And that concept should be pretty simple. The more runes you collect, the more you can level up. That's very straightforward. Now, what Melina will also give you is the Spectral Steed Whistle. And what I recommend doing is, once you get out of this dialogue, click your pause menu and go over here to the right side where you can add things on this menu. And I would put your Spectral Steed Whistle somewhere where it's easy to reach. So, for example, I put it right here, and then I can hold triangle for me, or maybe your Y button, and you click right where the D-pad is, and then that should allow you to call that out very easily. You're essentially putting Torrent in a quick use slot because you will be needing this quite a bit. And also, if you're playing Tarnished Edition, we can now customize Torrent. Anyways, the only thing you need to do right now is worry about leveling up and putting Torrent in an easy to reach place. And then from there, you can head just down into that camp and then collect this item, which is what the map fragments look like. Get used to this because you're going to be looking for more of these throughout the entire game. But once you pick it up, you'll see that you have an actually illustrated and detailed map showing you the terrain and where to go, more or less. Now that you've acquired Torrent and you can travel very easily, throughout your exploration, you're going to run into a lot of caves and dungeons. So I recommend starting with the first two just to get familiar with how these work. Let's start with the cave first. If you go just past the church and then up here to the left hand side of this wall, there is a cave opening, and you can go in here, you're going to find a site of grace, and then you can obviously grab that and then head down into the cave. This is going to put you in a small section where you can't actually fast travel out until you complete this cave or physically leave it. But I would come down here, defeat the enemies, and then head over to the bottom where you're going to meet your first mini boss. Now, this encounter might take you a couple tries, especially if you're brand new. This enemy will drop you an item that you can put on your talisman slot, and it is the first one you can realistically get in this game. If you successfully defeat any cave enemy, this little blue beam will spawn and it will teleport you back to the entrance of the cave, which is very nice. Now, there are also caves, but there are additionally dungeons, which are a little different, but they work similar in concept. You can't teleport out of these, you can't fast travel, but you'll get that grace in the beginning. Dungeons are a little bit more about puzzles, and so as you progress down, you'll see that there's a locked door here, and it will tell you that it's locked by some contraption. Your job is to find the statue that looks like this, and there will be one in every single dungeon. This one is pretty straightforward because it's one of the earliest ones you can do, but your job is to push through the dungeon, solve the puzzle until you can make your way over to that, and then click the lever, and that will permanently open the door to the boss of this puzzle dungeon. If you've returned to the church at any point after you've acquired Torrent, you may have noticed this witch speaking to you, and she's going to give you an item, these wolf spirit ashes. Now, I'm going to explain how spirit summons work in combat so that you can either utilize them if you want to, or you can completely ignore the system as well if you don't want to use summons. But for the people that just want to use everything that the game has to offer them, I'm going to explain how these work. Similarly with Torrent, you can place your spirit summons in a quick access slot, and if they're in here, whenever you see this little tombstone icon, that means you can spawn your spirit summons. And so this, for reference, could be useful when you're in that puzzle dungeon and you're facing off against this boss. You'll see the icon there, and if you want, you can have a little bit of extra help in combat by spawning in either these particular wolves or any spirit ashes you've otherwise acquired, as you're going to get a lot of them throughout your journey in the lands between. But as I said, this is a completely optional system. You don't have to utilize these in combat even once throughout this entire game if you don't want to. Despite what other people might have you think, there's genuinely no right or wrong way to play this game, and I mean that. That's the beautiful part about it, is you are the difficulty slider in this game. You can utilize any of the tools given to you, or you can utilize none of them and give yourself some extra challenge. It's completely up to you. Now, after you've familiarized yourself with the concept of caves and puzzle dungeons, right, you've kind of gotten a little bit comfortable with those. Now, what you should be doing in Limgrave is just exploring. You can go wherever you want, and honestly, there is no right or wrong way to go. Your only objective is to just explore. Just find things, go around, collect stuff, fight enemies if you want, and find sites of grace. That is going to be probably your biggest objective. But what you might find along the way are a couple of things, particularly a golden seed or a sacred tear. This right here is a golden seed. If you find one of these trees, it should have an item on it, and if you pick this up, you will acquire the golden seed item, and if you go to a site of grace afterwards, you can actually allocate an extra flask towards either your cerulean tears or your crimson tears, meaning you can get another HP drink or you can get an FP drink. Now this right here is a sacred tear. These are usually found at these churches, and there are plenty of them in Limgrave and throughout the rest of the lands between. But if you find one of these churches, pick up the sacred tear, and you can do the same thing inside of your menu, but instead of giving you an additional charge for your flask, it actually increases the amount restored by flasks, so it makes them stronger. Speaking of flasks, throughout your exploration of Limgrave, I would encourage you to stop by this particular church in this section of Limgrave, the Third Church of Marika. Once you come over here, you're going to notice that not only is there a sacred tear you can collect, but there's also a special item in this bowl, which is your Flask of Wondrous Physic. Now, this is a third flask type that's not your HP or FP restoring. Instead, this is a customizable flask, and as you collect different items for this, it will allow you to create certain combinations. So you could have a flask that steadily restores your health and then maybe gives you a little bit more poise or a bit more stamina or something like that. But you can mix and match these to whatever you want, and it's honestly a really fun system. It will start very simple because you won't have many options in the beginning, but this is going to be very nice to have later on. Now, if you're doing a lot of exploring and finding plenty of sites of grace around Limgrave and the Weeping Peninsula and so on, eventually Melena's going to come speak to you, and she's going to take you to the Round Table Hold. So let's talk a little bit about this section. You will be pulled here eventually, and when you're in the Round Table Hold, you can think of this like your central hub. This is useful for all sorts of things, particularly NPC quests, upgrading your weapons, and getting some really cool late game content. But the Round Table Hold is going to be something that you'll be want to revisit often. Initially, there will be some doors closed that will open later, but for at least for now, you have a couple of NPCs to talk to. You can get familiar with some of the characters in this area, and you can even talk to the Twin Maiden Husks that will sell you a couple of useful items. So just spend some time in the Round Table, get comfortable with it, but you can also teleport out of this space at any time and go back to the main map, and then you can go back to the Round Table Hold at pretty much any time by heading over to this grace in the left-hand corner of the map. So you've probably done a lot of exploring, but what I recommend you do now, once you've gotten a bit more confident, is from this side of grace near the top left corner of Limgrave, follow the trail that I'm going up this hill and then into this castle, as we're going to enter a hallway, and we're going to touch this side of grace inside on the left, because just in front of us is going to be our first main real story boss of the game, and I would highly recommend at least touching the grace here so that you can get back here quickly, even if you cannot defeat the boss yet. Now, you may have noticed that the smithing table that was found in the church at the beginning of the game is useful for upgrading your weapons only up to a certain level. At that point, you need basically a stronger table, and all of your main weapon upgrading will be done in the round table hold over where this guy is. Now, let's get into it a little bit. This is going to be a somewhat complicated section, but we're going to talk about all things combat in a more advanced way so that you can kind of understand either what weapons you should put into your build, how to maximize them, and get the most out of the particular weapons and equipment that you're going to be using. We're going to get into the weeds a little bit here, but stick with me because this information will maybe be some of the most important in this entire video. Okay, so every type of equipment or weaponry in the game falls into one of two categories. This includes swords, shields, bows, staffs, and seals. Everything that you can equip as a weapon will fall into one of two categories, either a normal weapon or a special weapon. So, for example, this Zweihander right here is a normal weapon. It's just a regular old sword that can be upgraded using regular smithing stones. Now, opposed to something like the Godslayer Greatsword, this is a special weapon that can only be upgraded through somber smithing stones. The main differences between these two category of weapons is how they're upgraded and what their abilities are. So with a normal weapon, you will start with its base version and then upgrade it through regular smithing stones all the way up to plus 25 as the maximum upgrade. It will require a lot of regular smithing stones, but as you go up in numeric value, so will your actual upgrade as well. And the skill on the weapon, or what's right here on the left side, the Ashes of War, can also be changed in just about every single normal weapon. You can go here to this category and select different abilities to put on that weapon. Now keep in mind, this will change the scaling properties of the weapon, which I'll talk about more in just a moment, but with a special weapon, it's a lot more simple because on special weapons, the Ashes of War ability is baked in and cannot be changed, and it only goes up to plus 10. But that being said, a plus 10 on a special weapon is still the equivalent of a plus 25 on a normal weapon. So if you're a brand new player and just want to simplify your weapons, I honestly recommend going after a special, and there are plenty of ways you can do that. So let's talk about weapon and damage scaling. Every single time you pick up a weapon or a staff or something like that, you're going to notice that that equipment has certain characteristics that have a letter assigned to a stat. So for example, you could pick up a sword that has a B in strength scaling and a C in dexterity scaling. What this means is that letter represents the value of the multiplier at which it will scale with your stats. Now, the closer it is to S, which is the top rank, the better you are. So E is a not very good scaling, D is a little better, C is about average, B is pretty good, A is great, and S is perfect. So you want ideally to get close to A or S for some of your scalings, or at least that is what the best multipliers are. So in that example, if you have a sword that scales B off strength and C off dexterity, you're better off putting more stats into strength, as that weapon is going to get more damage the more you scale up your strength than it would off dexterity. If you're casting sorceries, ideally you would want a staff that either has an A or S in intelligence scaling. Similarly, if you're using incantations, you would probably want a seal with either A or S faith scaling. Now, let's look at this as an example. For simplicity's sake, we have the Godslayer Greatsword. This is a special weapon upgraded with somber smithing stone, so its Ashes of War and attributes cannot be changed. And what you'll notice is this weapon has a C in strength scaling and a B in dexterity scaling, which, by the way, is pretty unusual for a greatsword. Most of the time, it is primarily based off of strength and not dexterity, but this is a little bit of a fringe case, but it just goes to show you what these can scale off of. So my character would get the maximum amount of damage by usually going into dexterity and also faith. The faith attribute would increase the damage that the fire does using its Ash of War ability. But let's look at the regular greatsword. This is a normal weapon, and it's a really good one that you can get in the game. Now, you can change the Ashes of War on this. You can customize its L2 ability, and what you'll notice here is that selecting different Ashes of War will change its properties, and then once you select that Ash of War that you want, you will have the opportunity to infuse it or select an attribute. And as you can see, this also changes the scaling. Now, for the Greatsword, if you picked something like Heavy, that will change your strength scaling from C to B, making it just better, honestly. Or you can infuse it with something like poison, which will probably reduce your physical damage output, but will add the ability to poison enemies. So it's kind of a trade-off. Either way, you want to look at what your build is, like what your character stats are and what you want them to be, and trying to match your weapon to best utilize that. So if my character is a strength, dexterity, and faith build, the Godslayer Greatsword is a really good option. Now, if that all makes sense, you might be tempted to just go all in on one attribute, right? If you are using that regular Greatsword as I showed in the example, why not go all in on strength and max out your stats to like 100? The thing is, there are these things called soft caps on your levels in Elden Ring, which is basically the point at which you start getting significantly diminished returns for increasing your level. So usually when you're starting the game, your increases in level will be pretty noticeable, but as you can see, here's the cheat sheet for all of the stats and at which point you start seeing diminished returns. And as you can see, pretty much anything over level 80 is not really going to do a whole lot for you. It's not going to add significant value to any type of attribute in just about any capacity. So just bear that in mind. That's a little bit more advanced stuff. This is really relevant if you're trying to like min-max your build, but for most people, you just really need to know that anything over level 80 is not going to give you really any value at that point. Now, if that all makes sense, let's move on to a little bit of advanced combat fundamentals. As far as fighting enemies go in this game, it's really about learning their moveset and being able to respond appropriately to that moveset, and also taking advantage of the mechanics that are there to help you. Poise is the ability to throw out an attack, get hit, and still finish your move without being interrupted, and that is determined usually most by the weight of your character, your armor, and your weapon can even be a part of that. But more importantly, for boss fights, what you really want to pay attention to is stance, and stance breaking enemies and then getting critical hits when you do that. In order to stance break bosses, you need to hit them enough consecutively or heavy enough to break their stance, and if they go down, you can walk up to them and then take your thumbs off the directional control and just press your right trigger to do a light attack, and that should initiate a critical hit. If you're holding forward, this might not work and you'll just do a regular light attack, so make sure that you're not holding any direction when you do this in order to get a proper critical punish. Now, what you can do to break the enemy's stance is obviously heavier weapons are going to be more adept to doing that. Certain weapon classes deal more or less stance damage. Usually bigger weapons are going to do more stance, but they're also, a bit slower to use. Using the right trigger for heavy attacks is a good way to break stance, as well as jumping heavy attacks. These are really powerful in Elden Ring and can get stance breaks like you wouldn't believe. Now, not only do you have invincibility or iframes when you roll at certain moves, but your jump also has a certain degree of iframes and can actually be quite useful as a defensive option in certain scenarios. A lot of things can be rolled through, but some things can be jumped over a bit more effectively, so it's something to try to integrate into your moveset. Now, if at any point you're struggling to use your build and want to switch to something else, if you acquire an item called a larval tear, you can go to the boss that you defeat in Raya Lucaria, and you can actually talk to her to change not only your cosmetics, but your build itself. You will basically reallocate all of the points that you've put into your level stats and reallocate them however you want. So if you want to go from a strength build to a dexterity build, you can do that, or you can completely change and go into something like intelligence. Okay, next let's talk about remembrances and great runes. Whenever you defeat a major story boss, you will most likely be given something called a remembrance of said boss, and what you can do with this is take it to the round table hold and talk to the maiden over here, and she will offer you either power or equipment from them. So you can either obtain their armor or usually their weapon and or a spell or something like that. Now, you obviously only have one soul to use, but you can actually duplicate these in case you want their armor and their weapon. For example, if you find some of these walking mausoleums, there's a few in stuff like Limgrave, there's a couple in Consecrated Snowfield. What you want to do is just hit these legs over and over again for a while until you down them. They will start to buckle at the legs and then they will collapse down, allowing you to enter the mausoleum, and then you can duplicate a remembrance. You can only duplicate one per mausoleum, so do it wisely, but this is very useful for obtaining boss weapons and some really cool armor later in the game. Another thing you'll get for defeating major story bosses are great runes. The first one you're probably going to get is Godrick's Great Rune, and this is also the one that I recommend for most new players. Now, the way you get this is after defeating Godrick, what you can do is head over to his Divine Tower, which can be found over here on the map. You just need to walk through the main gate of Stormvale and go all the way to the right and then go down this really long bridge, enter the teleporter, and then it should take you to the top of the tower in which you can collect the Great Rune. Now, once you collect it, you can place it on once you go to a site of grace, but you still need to activate it, and for that, you need a rune arc. This is an item that you can collect and you will probably find at some point in the lands between, but you need to use this rune arc, and you can see if your Great Rune is active by if it's glowing up here in the icon. Keep in mind, if you die, you'll lose the effect of that Great Rune until you pop another rune arc again. But for pretty much all new players, I recommend getting and activating Godric's Great Rune whenever you can in the game, as it is really helpful. All right, next, I'm going to show you how to access a few key areas of the map. The first one you might run into is trying to enter Raya Lucaria after you've entered Liurnia of the Lakes. Now, if you come across this gate right here that tells you you need a glintstone key to enter the academy, this is really easy to find. You just want to touch the grace that's right next to the gate, as we can fast travel back here, but you just want to move forward and then go towards this cave here on the map, and the glintstone key will be found just behind this dragon that is guarding it on this throne. But you can pick up this item, and that will be the key you need in order to enter this gate. Next, I'm going to show you how to get the Dectus medallion so that you can access the Altus Plateau from Liurnia of the Lakes if you want to. Now, there are a few other ways to get here, so you might end up here regardless, but if you want the quick and easy way to use the elevator, there are two pieces you need to collect. The first one is in this fort over here, Faroth in Limgrave. You just need to climb to the top of this castle and then head up over here on the right side, where you go up the ladder all the way to the top, and the item should be in the chest right there. That is one half that we need. The other half is in Caelid, and it's going to be found in this particular fort over here on the right. Once you're in this fort, you need to walk in, go all the way to the left, and then there should be a kind of doorway where you can go up the ladder just like you did in the first one, head all the way to the top, and the chest at the peak should be the other half of the medallion you need. This will allow you to go from Liurnia straight to the Altus Plateau using that elevator, making your life much, much easier. Next, I'm going to show you a very consistent and easy way to access the DLC. Now, you should only be taking on the DLC after you've played a significant portion of the base game. You'll gain access to it at a certain point, but most likely you should spend a lot of the base game leveling up and creating your build before you take on the DLC would be my recommendation. But in order to access it, it's actually kind of out of the way. So I'm going to show you the easiest way that I like to do to get this. So what you need to do is start by building the secret medallion. Now, the way you acquire this is by getting one half of the piece over in the Albinauric village, and the way you get there is just following my route from this grace over here in Liurnia. This is just a nice starting point that everybody probably has, and you're going to follow exactly where I go into this cave, and you kind of just want to hang on the left side as you go through, and then you can see that there's this like part of the mountain that goes up, and then you follow it through here, and then you should end up in a village that looks like this. You can collect the grace that's right here, and then go kind of like hang on the right side of the wall, and then go up to the top here as you should see this jar. You can melee it once to reveal the person living inside it, and then exhaust his dialogue. After you talk to him, he's going to give you one half of the secret medallion piece. The other half is on the complete other side of the map in the mountaintop of the giants. It'll be located in the fort here called Castle Sol. So once you have access to the mountaintop of the giants area, you can come over here to this castle, and starting at the site of grace that's right at the entrance, I'm going to show you the route that I take to clear this castle, get over to the other side of it to acquire this piece. Now, this castle can be kind of confusing, so just follow my route closely, and there's a couple of traps you need to avoid. Getting to this boss kind of sucks because you actually will need to kill him before you can get the piece, but as you follow my route here, you should kind of be able to drop down, and then if you come over here to the left side, you enter this church, there will be this kind of other room that will have a grace in there that you can use, and I would definitely recommend picking this one up and then starting from here. Take yourself all the way past the church, hang out the left side, and then go up this kind of like staircase, and then keep following this path as you come outside, and there should be a boss door here. You just need to enter this, defeat this boss. After he's dead, you continue to run through, and then there's an elevator on the right side. Take that elevator up, and then the secret piece will be right there as an item, and then you have the secret Halig Tree medallion. This allows you to access the consecrated snowfield at the lift instead of going to the mountaintop of the giants. Once you're in the consecrated snowfield, you need to go and activate this site of grace. This is where we're going to be starting from. So just make your way through the section until you get here. Now, once you're from this grace, we're going to go all the way to the right side, and then we're going to go down this path. You should get an invader right here. He will most likely invade you, but you need to kill him before you do this next part. So take out the Sanguine Noble, follow this path that I'm going, and you should see a portal with blood pouring out of it just down here over on the side. And then you can enter this to go to the next area, which is the Mogwin Palace. Once you enter Mogwin Palace, just simply follow through, go through this entire area, climb all the way up to the top of the palace and defeat the boss, which will be Mog, the Lord of Blood. This might take you a while to kill. This is kind of a hard boss, so it's basically like if you're not able to kill him, you probably shouldn't be doing the DLC yet. But this is how you access it. Once Mog is dead, you can go over to the Withered Arm, and if you touch it, you will be transported to the Realm of Shadow, and this is the DLC section. By the time you make it to the DLC, you probably have a pretty good handle on the base game, so I'm not going to explain it the way I did the base game, but what I am going to tell you is that there are two mechanics you'll want to recognize for the DLC specifically. Now, leveling up does not really change your performance in the Land of Shadow. Rather, you want to be looking for the Shadow Tree fragments that are found all over the map, and I'm going to put one on screen so that you can see where they are if you would like them, but what you're going to want to do is use these Shadow Tree fragments that will boost not only your defense, but your offense. It's basically like a separate leveling system, particularly for the DLC content, so that doesn't really screw with the base game experience all that much. And just like summons, you don't necessarily have to use these, so you can make the DLC experience as difficult or as easy as you want to, depending on how many of these Shadow Tree fragments you collect. I know that was a lot of information covered, and if you watch this all in one sitting, it might feel like a lot, so I recommend coming back to this video as you play, just to reference the part, just depending on what you need help with. And I wanted to cram as much as I possibly could to make a very comprehensive video, because Elden Ring shouldn't be as intimidating as it is to maybe a lot of people picking it up on Switch too, so I really hope this helped, and if it did, just let me know and leave a like on the video. Plus, there'll be plenty more Elden Ring videos besides this that I'm sure you'll find interesting on the game as well very soon, so make sure to subscribe for that. But hope this helped, enjoy the game, and I'll talk to you guys soon.